We're delighted to have Jim with us today. And we've got some great questions, I think, that everyone will really enjoy the answers to. Margie?
Yeah, so this project is really about what was the thinking behind some of the early kind of materials that sort of really brought the public participation, engagement kind of profession to life. And we know, Jim, you've been very much part of that beginning, and perhaps the earlier beginning than many of the people that we've already interviewed. So I guess, my first question is exactly that, Jim. Like, what was happening for you professionally, or in terms of in terms of the kind of the things that you come across in terms of your work that led to some of your early thinking around the materials that are related to this profession?
Okay, I can pinpoint exactly when I suddenly got interested in public participation. I've been working in team building, team effectiveness, meeting leadership, those kinds of issues, and I've been doing some training courses for U.S. Forest Service, Bureau of Reclamation, Corps of Engineers, who were running Job Corps centers. And so I was training Job Corps staff. And one of the training officers for the U.S. Forest Service phoned and said, and this is as literal as I can get it, we have this new law that says we have to consult with the public, and we don't know what it means. But whenever we get together, we spend all our time trying to figure out how many cops we have to prevent a riot. Can you do any better? So I actually went up, my wife and I went up to Alaska and conducted the very first public participation training course for Forest Service. I was also aware of the fact that I was teaching something where, yes, I'd done all of that stuff in other contexts, but not specifically in the public context. So by the late 70s, early 80s, I was getting hired to do agency-wide appraisals of public involvement for EPA, for the Bureau of Reclamation, and so forth and so on. And I noticed one of your questions is about writing a manual. I actually had a contract from Bureau of Reclamation to prepare a manual. And by then I'd worked on a number of projects. So I felt I was legit to advise people and so on.
So when did you first self-identifying as a public participation practitioner?
Well, pretty early in that first year.
Okay.
Anytime you did that, you had to explain what public participation meant.
We still do, Jim. We still do.
Yeah. If I go to parties or something and people ask what I do, and I always have to resist the urge to say I sell life insurance, because then I know I won't have to explain it. I was working with government agencies and utility companies, and in most cases, they're not out at the far right on the spectrum. They're still going to make the decision, if only because they're financially and legally liable for the outcome of the decision. And while you can have a lot of public impact on the decision, they're not handing over the decision to the public. Public influences, and particularly what you hope for is if the public identifies problems early in the process, it's much easier and cheaper to solve the problem with early design changes than it is to wait till you're clear down to the end and the agency's busy defending its selection and gets forced into having to make changes. And almost always those changes are then very expensive.
So this is really good, because this is something I had wanted. As I did more research last night, and I was looking at the dates of some of the things you published. There was one that you published that mentioned in its title, as I recall, to make better decisions. And I forget what the exact date of that was, but like, when was that? what were you doing at the time, and what were the challenges you were facing? What were you seeing in the practice of public participation? As you said, you were a little frustrated with what passed for it at the time that said, no, this isn't just going through the motions. This is like we make better decisions by getting the public involved. Like, when did that really crystallize for you? Or how
Pretty,
did that crystallize for you?
pretty early. One of the big problems I could see was that a lot of agencies were going through the routine of having public meetings and things like that and so on. Often the problem initially when I would work with them would be that they were having them way too late in the process,
Yeah.
where it was really hard to impact the decision. If you wanted to impact the decision, you had to get it way front end problem definition kind of stage. And I didn't like doing public participation. That was only because it was a procedure where it says you got to do this because you got to do it. My bias is if you're going to do it, it needs to be able to change something. Something's different because you went through the process. And so that was seeking out ways to have a genuine impact on things. What I see happen a lot, if agencies that just do the routine, as it says here, they gotta public gets that pretty quick. The public can tell that you're just doing it by the numbers, and why should I bother to?
In what way do you think your ADR experience influenced your approach to public participation, or did it?
Well, it made me real clear on the difference between when you're trying to solve a problem by mutual agreement and when you're doing public. Just for one thing, to get a real agreement, you have to have well-defined parties who are able to make commitments on behalf of the party they represent. And that condition almost never occurs in public participation. You sometimes have participants who could play that role, but then you have 50 people are upset about something and no organization whatsoever, and yet they feel a right to participate and be engaged and so on.
So I think probably one of our sort of last questions is really around how you see the future of engagement from where you sit as somebody who's been there probably the longest of all of the people that we've interviewed. What do you see about the future? What are you observing?
Well, the problem we still have in the field is that to come to high levels of consensus, people really have to talk to each other. And having people stand up and make speeches at meetings doesn't do it. If you get there early enough and people are influenced before they're locked in place, that helps. But we still don't have a real great solution for how you bring people who have different values together and really have the kind of intense dialogue that can change people's opinions. And I don't have an answer for that. That was part of what the exploration of alternative dispute resolution was about, was what in that field. Yeah, and most of the conditions for that field were conditions you'd never get in public participation. I mean, to have an intense dialogue, you have to have people who are committing major chunks of time, and they have to be able to make commitments on behalf of their interests and all the things that only pop up every now and then in public participation. And so that's still, I wrote a manual just a couple of years ago for a Portuguese software company that had developed public participation software. And they asked me to do a kind of an appraisal of the field. And I had to end up with the same conclusion. The problem we still have to solve is how you have intense dialogues of the kind where people might actually be influenced by each other. And we do some of it, but a lot of it is still forums for people to express predetermined positions. And
it's interesting, Margie, because this reminds me a lot of the conversation with Peter Sandman about his sweet spot, and I think that's what you're talking about too, is trying to get to that sweet spot where people are not positioned off, people are still willing to listen to each other, possibly be influenced by other people's opinions, and aren't so sufficiently outraged or angry that conversation is impossible. So yeah, I mean, I do think we have successes here and there, but I don't know that challenge, actually, personally, I feel like that challenge in the US, I'll just speak for this, is getting harder because people walk into any room, it seems to me, positioned off before they even know who they're talking to. Would you agree?
I not only agree, but I'm living in a independent living place where we all have meals together, and I'll find somebody I really like and so on, and then accidentally we'll drift into politics, and I suddenly realize we're not having any more meals together.
So if you were talking to somebody who is just coming into the field and excited about doing public participation and helping agencies and industry and communities make better decisions, what advice would you give them?
Well, I've hit some of the critical stuff early. It's got to be clear back at problem definition. That has quite a bit to do with whether or not you can still talk with each other. Having public participation be part of decision making, not, so almost like environmental studies. Go off and do a study, come back when you're done. If the public involvement gets like that, it's not worth doing. It's just a routine, a procedure to follow, and you've complied with the regs, but you have not complied with the spirit of what public participation is supposed to be. Somehow I think we need to start experimenting more with dialogue kinds of things, where we have intense discussions. One of the problems you have, of course, is you can only have an in-depth dialogue with relatively few people. I don't know whether you can have a genuine dialogue electronically, but I'd be delighted to be proved wrong.
I think we've probably come to the end of our questions, have we, Lewis?
Well, my favorite question is, Jim, is there a question you wish we would have asked you?
No, I'm just in the quandary because between being a caretaker for my wife as she died, and then COVID, I wasn't very active in anything for several years, and people have forgotten that I exist. So,
well, with up to this point, Jim, and I'm going to speak out of turn here. I should consult with my partner, Margaret, but I've been thinking about this as we've been going on. This is such a rare opportunity to have had this talk with you, this conversation with you, Jim, and it would be a crying shame for you to be forgotten for all of us that you've meant so much to. And I've been the primary editor. What's that?
So of course I think so. I'd be ashamed.
I was hoping we would have consensus on that. Give our thanks to Jim for doing this with us, for contributing as much to the practice as you have, for starting IAP2, regardless if it wasn't what you thought it was going to be. And
I'm sure there are times that you were sitting in board meetings where you regretted establishing IAP2.
I'll remain silent on that. But in any case, yeah, this has been great. Thank you so much for your time, Margie.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Jim.